Minister Imhotep here, continuing my series on the Gospel of Thomas, that controversial document that was found in 1945 in Nag Hammadi, Egypt. That's in Upper Egypt, also Southern Egypt, because the upper is the southern when you're referring to Egypt. It was preserved for almost 2,000 years because of that dry climate there. And it sheds a lot of light on the teachings of Jesus, those so-called secret teachings. He had the exoteric teachings were for the outside, and there were some esoteric teachings that were for the inner circle. And Jesus said in Mark that he taught in parables for those on the outside, but he also went into depth for those who were on the inside. This is some of those teachings. It probably was not the only collection of them, but it's the only one that was preserved due to the special circumstances. And we have it now to share and to go through and to see more of what Jesus actually taught. There's no narrative to it. It's all a collection of sayings, and most of them actually appear in the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But as with anything that was based off of an oral tradition, there are some variances, but that's due to the people who actually copied it, heard it, and even sometimes the same person giving the same lesson, the same teaching, sometimes can vary that teaching. So,
Yes, hi. I actually was on a YouTube station or talk show podcast
the channels
that was talking about the sayings of Thomas, because I too wanted to understand more, have a narrative, have some of that broken down, because some of it is really a little bit obscured. And the part about this secret teaching, this individual, I don't remember his name. I thought he was like John Frank, or I got to go back. Don't quote me on that.
There's a lot of them out there.
There's a lot of them out there, right? You have to be, discriminating, but discreet, whatever. But he said, going back to the secretive nature of the teachings, this person was saying a lot of that had to do too with the times that they were in, and the ruling party, the Judea ruling party, and how you just couldn't be out in the open talk about things like that without sacrificing your safety. Yes.
Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah, I thought that was really good to clarify, just for some future clarification on some of these sayings is needed. Yes.
And that's both from the Roman occupiers as well as the Jewish authorities, because a lot of those things would be considered heretical, so they were, they, as you say, they were putting their lives on the line and many times with these things. Let's see, who else had the hand up? Gail?
Also, with his group, not everybody was ready.
Right.
He was teaching them. So in number 17, where it says, "What I give you has never been seen, heard, touched, or entered into the human mind." Supposedly, Thomas basically understood what he was talking about. Supposedly, Mary understood.
Right.
And Peter got some of it, but I don't know if he got it all. But between Thomas and Mary, and Matthew was good at writing, but not all of the group was
well,
ready.
That's the case in any situation. You go into any classroom, and automatically there's some who are A students, some are B students, some need some little remedial help. People come at all levels based off their experience, their household, what it was, did they have parents that are reading to them at home, and those types of things. So all those things go into your different levels of understanding and your life experience. Some people have come through the hard knocks, and they have a very definite view on that because of how they were shaped and formed. Other peoples have had relative lives of ease, and that colors how they see the world as well. So same thing with this, but to everybody's point, they were coming in at different levels of consciousness, and there were genuine concerns about safety. So some of these teachings, but even beyond the safety and what was happening in that contemporary times, it was just part of the way things were instructed. Even if you go back to the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, uh, go into Hinduism, go to the monasteries, uh, some things were just sort of spoken that weren't necessarily written down, and it was part of an oral culture and oral tradition as well. So lots of different factors played into it. So don't think sometimes of the term as secret as covert or secretive, but just maybe it's just those teachings that were more personal or intimate that not everybody was exposed to or aware of. And what's great about it is you see much of what's written here. It's the same thing that you find in the Gospels, but sometimes you see a little bit more of it here, or a little bit, it's just shaded a little bit different, but a lot of it is actually verbatim to what's in the Gospels. Because we got the parable of the sower and all that's in here as well. It's a little different. It's like anybody telling a story, though, especially an oral story. It's going to differ somewhat. Like if you went over to the wren's nest and heard Akbar Imhotep Ashe when he was alive to recite a story, it would his narrative and his delivery, his emphasis might be different. If you heard somebody else tell the same story about Br'er Rabbit or Uncle Remus, they may have a little bit the different things that they emphasize differently, but the essence of the story is the same. The context is the same. As they say, the moral of the story, what you take away from it, is the same. So you have to be able to expect that as well, because most of these people didn't know how to write. They were illiterate for the most part. Scribes wrote it down. That was their job, to actually document these things and to write them down. But the common masses didn't necessarily have access to that or know how to write, or that's why they went to the synagogues and had it read to them. That's why the Catholic Church held so much sway and power, because they were doing their liturgy in Latin, and nobody knew what Latin. They were just listening. Felt good, but for a long time it was a big deal for them just to do it in common English up to a point. So I think it was also about protecting that status quo. When you have power, you want that influence and you want that authority. And if you got somebody talking about, well, now you are one and have just as much right to hear and interpret what God is speaking and laying on your heart as anyone else, that begins to threaten their money, their position, their influence, all these things that have been sort of baked in. We'll say, wait a minute now, you're moving a little bit too quickly here. You're getting beside yourself. So, you got to check yourself before you wreck yourself. And so they literally were trying to crack down on some of those things, because the Romans were like, is this a political threat that we have to be concerned about? That's all they cared about, power and government. But the Jewish authorities were like, their prestige, their influence, and their position were associated with that as well. So mysticism didn't start, just with Jesus or the Jews. That was a form of teaching. If we know that Dr. Rocco Errico, for many of you who've been at Hillside, Dr. Rocco was one of the treasures that we've had around at Hillside many times, speaking once a month, also helping to teach over at the Barbara King School of Ministry. But he wrote a book called The 7 Keys, Let There Be Light. As a matter of fact, I have it over here. Let me see. Boom, yep. Ah, well. So the 7 keys, and one of the 7, the third of the 7, was mysticism. Understanding that that's how they talk. So, we knew about the language, the culture, the figures of speech or idioms and all those things, but also the mysticism that mysticism, it really means about trying to teach or show that there's a deeper connection, that you can be at one with the universe. You can be at one with God. And there are many forms of Jewish mysticism. Wasn't just one variety. As I said, there were many forms of Christianity. There was many forms of mysticism. And we have to assume that Jesus, being raised as a Jew, was familiar or made aware of some of these forms, and they were incorporated into the way he taught and his instruction as well. Got a video for you. Let's go to the videotape, and it talks a little bit about Jewish mysticism.
Traditions and context. But mysticism, and Jewish mysticism, is more than that too. It's a whole tendency within Judaism that includes certain features and characteristics. A leading scholar of Jewish mysticism, Elliot Wolfson, puts it really well when he says, quote, "It is possible to isolate two distinct concerns running through all the major texts that scholars include in the corpus of Jewish mysticism. On the one hand, there is the claim to an esoteric knowledge, whose content will naturally vary from one period to another, that is not readily available to the masses through the more common avenues of religious worship, ritual, or study."
That's what we talked about, the esoteric, that knowledge that's not commonly available. Esoteric meaning insider, just thinking inside, versus exoteric, which is the outside that's available to the population. So he's saying that there are two distinct concerns. One is about the esoteric nature, and the other is the emphasis placed on an intense religious experience. He'll get into it, and that's I guess part of the ritual that is associated with mysticism as well. Often you'll have like rites of passage. You'll have like smoke lodges, different things. So different cultures have these things that bring you, that initiate you into those traditions.
The second major element identifiable in Jewish mystical literature is the emphasis placed on intense religious experience. The particular form of this experience varies, but it usually includes one or more of the following: heavenly ascent, vision of the divine form, angelification, or mystical union. The word mysticism will be used here to refer to those trends of thought in Judaism that lay claim to either an esoteric knowledge of the Godhead, theosophy, or to an intense religious experience of a visionary or unitive sort, ecstasy, though I do not think these two can always be separated in a clear and distinct manner. These points should be kept in mind as we move through the episode. In fact, with all this in mind, mysticism can be found all over the history of Judaism in different ways, expressing itself in different ways and taking on different forms, but arguably always being there in some way or another. As early as we can possibly go into the very days of the Israelite biblical prophets, we have clear indications that the very prophetic experience itself is in some way mystical. In ancient Israel, with its cult centered in Jerusalem, there were, as we all know, several prophets that appeared from time to time to relay messages from God, often involving criticisms of the way the Israelites lived and worshipped. And these prophets seem to have had very powerful experiences as part of the revelatory process, which could even be induced by things like music and dancing. This becomes even more apparent in the later medieval Jewish thinkers such as Maimonides, who conceives of a theory of prophecy that is decidedly mystical. The person gradually perfects his intellective faculty and spirit until it is so perfect that it receives an overflow of revelation from God directly to the intellect. He says, quote, "Know that the true reality and quiddity of prophecy consists in its being an overflowing from God. May he be cherished and honored, through the intermediation of the active intellect toward the rational faculty in the first place, and thereafter towards the imaginative faculty. This is the highest degree of man and the ultimate term of perfection that can exist for his species, and this state is the ultimate term of perfection for the imaginative faculty." The mysticism of biblical prophecy is perhaps most clear and striking in one particular account, the famous vision of Ezekiel. In the very opening to the book of Ezekiel in the Hebrew Bible, we are presented with a positively shocking and almost psychedelic experience where the prophet has a vision of the throne chariot of God, surrounded by fire and strange, frightening creatures with several heads, wheels inside wheels covered with eyes. It's an absolutely mind-bending account of a direct encounter with the divine that can certainly be called mystical, and would continue to be an important inspiration for later expressions of mysticism too. Moving just a little bit ahead in history, we also should mention the literature and intellectual movement in Judaism, often called apocalypticism, which give us some of the most long-lasting features not only of later Judaism, but also of Christianity and Islam. In this literature, there are certainly mystical elements, such as in the books of Enoch, which describes how the titular character ascends on a kind of heavenly journey, being taken up by God, quote-unquote, and eventually being transformed into the angel Metatron, making it some of the earliest examples of ascent literature, which would be so important to mysticism, of course. And in the earliest forms of Jewish philosophy, we also find features that many would certainly conceive as mystical. The ever important and fascinating Philo of Alexandria, a Middle Platonist Jewish philosopher who often read the Bible esoterically according to Platonic philosophy, introduced many ideas that would be recurring in the history of mysticism. Despite being Jewish, he would become more influential, arguably, in Christianity, but his impact in Jewish thought is not insignificant either. For example, he talks about the fact that the human being can have mystical experiences of the vision of God and even achieve union with God or an aspect of God, a theme that we will definitely return to. Perhaps the first kind of mystical movement within Judaism, especially after the biblical prophetic period, is a movement that appears in the first few centuries AD, so just after the fall of the Second Temple, and it's the period, of course, when rabbinic Judaism as we know it really started to develop. And this is a kind of mysticism that is often referred to as Merkava and Hechalot mysticism, which means chariots and palaces, respectively. And this is a really, really fascinating type of mysticism that often involves ascent, or rather sometimes descent, as we will see, and visions of this chariot throne of God, which is, of course, as you probably have guessed, directly related to this vision of Ezekiel that we mentioned earlier. To give you an overview of this incredible kind of early Jewish mysticism, here is Dr. Justin Sledge from the channel Esoterica to tell you more.
And so we can pop out there, and you guys have the link and the things, and you can go and learn a little bit more about Jewish mysticism.
Right.
There we go.
Yes. Yeah, I like to also be a little bit more inclusive, in terms of mysticism, because I people may know about the dungeon, Dugan, D-O-G-O-N tribe. Right, and how they studied the constellations.
Right, Orion, Sirius
and
B.
Yeah, that was deep, but that's an African tribe, and I love to include us, in these studies, because we were definitely present, if not the first ones, to teach this.
Absolutely.
To study this, right. But how they use the constellations to know of a supreme presence, and even their language, how they spoke it, and their language, how they spoke it. So it was in the present. They always spoke terms that said that they were in the presence and that they were one with their actions, and and their consciousness.
And we actually carried a lot of that forth with us. They called it, what do they call it? When we say we be and we and so forth, that we're in the present, that we're thinking and saying. So it is actually correct as well. But the Dogon were able to map out the stars, the presence of Sirius B and the Orion belt, and knew the cosmology of what was going on and everything. So some of them may have been part of the ancient Egyptian folks as well. That we know there was a migration from the east over to the west, the Ashanti and all of those folks. But yes, we always have to include ourselves as part of the tradition, but also remembering that these people are Afro-Asiatic people as well. So they're not separate from us either. It's because Africa, that continent, has the most diverse people, the tallest, the shortest, the darkest, the lightest, you have that whole range of people that are reflected in Africa. So we bring a lot to it.
Could you spell that, please?
Dogon, D-O-G-O-N.
D-O?
D-O-G-O-N.
Thank you.
So, but Kabbalah has gained a lot of, popularity lately because of stars like Madonna and Ariana Grande and all those types of folks, pop stars. There's a big Kabbalah center in Hollywood, just like, they get on to a lot of things, popular fads and traditions and, these new movements and so forth. But that's why you see like the tree of life in Kabbalah. But the word itself just really literally means to receive, to be receptive, to be open. The Jewish people are very, symbolic. That was another one of the 7 keys from Dr. Rocco was symbolism. But even their language has a lot of nuance as well. I know Bishop Jack last summer, I believe, taught a class on numerology. And numerology is the key to understanding the Jewish religion and mysticism as well, because the 27 letters of the Jewish alphabet, I believe there are 27, but each one of them has a special meaning number value as well. Um, but that their writing system actually evolved out of ancient Hebrew, like we talked about the Coptic. That this Bible was actually printed in the Coptic language, but it was written in Greek letters. It was the Coptic language that was written in Greek. So there was a lot of intermingling and spreading around of thoughts and traditions. Uh, Egypt was one of those places that held libraries, and people would come, especially the Greek, to learn from their Egyptian elders. Alexandria on the coast of the Mediterranean was known as a center for exchange of ideas. And down in Nag Hammadi, where the Gospel of Thomas was found, there was a monastery that was very close by. So a lot of, unfortunately, as people came in, especially when the Muslims came into Egypt and began to take over, they burnt a lot of the stuff. They destroyed a lot of the libraries because they thought it was against Allah, against their traditions, and they were destroying a lot of ancient wisdoms, like the libraries at Timbuktu and all those things. There are a lot of things that we've lost and don't have access to, and in many ways we keep reinventing ourselves, trying to catch up with what they'd already documented for so many thousands of years before us. But the Kabbalah is something that it's actually supposed to predate Judaism, and it's really about opening up to being receptive to understanding yourself, knowing yourself, that same edict that they always tell us, know thyself, understanding your connection and your unity to God. And they do it by going and dissecting the names that are in the Bible, how they were written, how they were spelled, the numerical value of them, and all those things that they are teaching us beyond just the laws. So there are different levels to it. You can get the law, then you can get the law within the law, and then you can get the law within the law within the law. It's almost like what was the one that the dream within the movie about the dream within the dream within the dream. You can go down to these almost like those Russian cups, doll cups, where they keep stacking it, and the more you take them out, you keep going
Hello
down.
and welcome to Kabbalah Revealed. I'm Tony Koznak. I'm a student, one of the students of Rav Michael Lightman, who is the direct disciple of Rav Baruch Shalom Halevi Ashlag, who is the son and direct disciple of Rav Yehuda Ashlag, Bala Salam, better known as the Master of the Ladder, who was acknowledged as the preeminent Kabbalist of the 20th century. I give you those credentials because there is such a thing as a teaching lineage within Kabbalah, and what we are going to speak about is authentic Kabbalah. And we're going to give you a perspective, not of scholars, but of practitioners, people who are Kabbalists. And in this series, you'll get not only an overview of authentic Kabbalah, but also the keys, the basic concepts, the ways of approaching this wisdom so that it can open to you. Because it is a way of study, a way of thinking, and a way of feeling very different from our normal sense of things. And it requires, as any skill does, a mastery of the basics. And in our series of 20 or so lessons, we will cover all of the ones that are important for you to know. But let's start with an overview of Kabbalah, because there's a great deal of confusion about it. There's a lot of information about Kabbalah out there. There are, I think, maybe 1,000 books a year are published on the subject, and almost none of them have anything to do at all with Kabbalah. They're just some kind of a mishmash of people's imaginations of what they think it could be, what it should be, their intuition, their imagination, and it's not their fault. There's a great longing to know what Kabbalah actually is, because there is a sensation that it's important, that it's powerful, and that it has a grasp of something that is hidden in this world. It's called a hidden science for three reasons. One, it has been purposely hidden by the practitioners of Kabbalah themselves, by the Kabbalists. Kabbalah started 4,000 years ago with Abraham, around the year 1947, 1948, before the Common Era. And for that period of time, 2,000 years until the beginning of the Common Era, the destruction of the Second Temple, it was not hidden. It was widely taught. You know the stories of Abraham sitting in the door of his tent and welcoming travelers to come and he would show his hospitality. Well, what he was actually doing was he was feeding them and he was teaching them about the wisdom of Kabbalah. And the type of souls that lived at that time in this world were a little bit more refined than the souls that live now, and they understood it more naturally. But something occurred at the beginning of the Common Era, at the destruction of the temple, that made it impossible for people of that generation and for the 2,000 years that followed to really understand anything in Kabbalah. That's the point at which religions appeared. That's the point at which speculation about how this world works, what the universe is, what the creator is, and so on, grew up in the imaginations of people according to a particular principle that leapt to the forefront within the human being in their development. And this quality within people prevented them from understanding. And so the Kabbalists hid it. So if you don't have access to something, you still have the books. The problem is that it's also called a hidden wisdom because the books themselves are written in a very special language, unbeknownst to the people who are reading them. All the books of Kabbalah are written in a language called language of branches, in which they use words from our world, objects, cup, book, table, family, travels, wars, all of these things that you see in the 5 books of Moses and all the other Kabbalistic books, but they're not speaking of anything in this world. Not a single word of any Kabbalistic book is referring to anything in this world. It only refers to the forces above which create and sustain the things that appear in this world. And so the Kabbalists used a special language that would indicate that what they were really speaking about. And only a student who had attained a certain wisdom would be able to understand and hear it that way. Now, you have to understand that the world that we live in is not a world of causes. It's a world of outcomes. There is nothing that we do in this world that has any effect whatsoever on the upper world where our source comes from, where the things that we see in this world take their roots. No physical action has any effect on it. And that's why any of the things that we do in order to solve our problems here in this world have any effect whatsoever on their outcome. Only a connection to the roots, to the causal level of things, can have any effect whatsoever. And this is what Kabbalah deals with. Our reality as a whole is structured in such a way that there is a world that exists above, so to speak, and a world that exists below. And the language of branches points to what exists in the world below. It speaks about this object, let's say a family. You'll read about it in the Torah. And the Torah appears to be the story of the Jewish people. Well, a family will move to a location called a land. But the Kabbalists are not speaking about this at all. They're speaking about the abstract forces above that actually create these things and make them occur. And only a wise student can understand what's really going on here. This is the branch level, and this is the root level. So Unless a person learns how to read and understand the key to this language called language of branches, they will continue to see things as they exist in this world. So as a result of those two aspects of hiddenness of Kabbalah, and because of a lack of contact with the teaching lineage and the real methodology, people have still needed to know, but they've had to fantasize, they've had to make concoctions of things, and they've gone according to what they could understand without a correct teaching and without the proper inner properties that would allow them to understand it. And so a lot of myths have grown up. Now we will deal with these in a little more detail when we talk about some of the other
So he goes on, and in fact, he has a series of these videos. This is like the basic overview, the introduction to Kabbalah, but I think there are about 19 more in this series. If you really wanted to immerse yourself and go deeply within it, you have the possibility to do so. But as you can see, it can get rather confusing, and it can get pretty deep because you have to have so much background in Jewish literature, Jewish language, Jewish customs, traditions, alphabet, numerology, that it can get pretty confusing pretty quickly. But I think the main thing is just knowing that a lot of this is how they taught, and a lot of this is how Jesus would naturally teach as well, because that was the custom and tradition that he came through. So it shouldn't come as a surprise when we hear about secret teachings, thinking it's something nefarious. That's just how they do and did things, and that's what the culture and tradition he was a part of. So now we can get into our sayings and see what they had to do, how to speak to us. Okay, Jesus said, "Blessed is the lion which becomes man when consumed by man. The man is eating the lion, and cursed is the man whom the lion consumes, and the lion becomes man." Any thoughts on that? Okay, anybody want to take a stab?
Well, it also says that we have both the lion and the human within us,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to honor one and control the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's basically what he was saying, because then that, to me, comes down to where he says, hold on. I'm not finding it, but I remember it. Here we go. Number 43. I'm sorry, that's page 43. 14C, what comes out of your mouth defiles you,
Mm-hmm.
and what goes, and not what goes in. And that's just, that kind of, brings those two together.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, some of the ones here.
You remember Jesus said that when they were talking about his disciples not washing their hands and everything, and he said, it's what comes out of the mouth that defiles. So again, that's in the gospel, in the the canonized version, the canonical version. So so none of this should be seen as heretical. It's just us getting a little bit more of his teaching. Are you familiar with the Sphinx there in Egypt, where it's the body of the lion and it's the head of a person? So we can, I guess, look at that lion as being ego, as being the animalistic nature of us, being those baser things that we eventually have to rise to take dominance over, as you said, to subordinate those things, to tame them, if you will. Because if you don't Your ego will consume you and eat you up. And we've seen what it looks like when people have been consumed with ego. They become narcissistic to a fault. We have examples of that of some politicians who are prominent and running who can't admit to having lost, can't admit to getting anything wrong, can't admit to anything that they perceived as a loss because that would make them feel less. And so they've been consumed by their ego. The lion has eaten them up. But it's a better thing for the man who can consume the lion, who can dominate over that having that human reasoning, rational intellect, and those things that control those animalistic urges, that control that ego running rampant, raging, devouring, eating, conquering. And so that is the better situation when the man can consume the lion. You end up in the same place. They both become man, but you're in a greater position of self-mastery when you can dominate and control to tame that lion within. Okay, we go to saying 8. And he said, the man is like a wise fisherman who cast his net into the sea and drew it up from the sea full of small fish. Among them the wise fisherman found a fine large fish. He threw all the small fish back into the sea and chose the large fish without difficulty. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. And you'll see that phrase repeated often, whoever has ears to hear, or whoever has eyes to see, just simply meaning whoever can comprehend this. Go ahead, take it in. Okay. This also sounds somewhat similar. Jesus also talked about fishing and casting nets and fishers of men and all these types of things, because that was largely who he was talking to, people who made either their living from the sea, or he gets into agricultural analogies and metaphors and stories for those who were farmers and who lived off the land. So he spoke to the people. Again, he was meeting them where they are, connecting to them with things they can relate to. Any thoughts on this one?
Oh, okay. Okay. This is what I got out of this. And that was part of from the book also. It says, the many and the few, or the small and the large, which Jesus will, he would bring in a lot of the Old Testament also. And then where it says that he threw the smalls away and kept the large, it's like that a shepherd who left the 99 to go get that one. And it's also like the sower, which is the next one. He's letting them know that, like, you may say things or you may do things and think that you're going to get a crowd, but it's that one that's going to be what you think is the most special. Let me put it that way. But like the book says, common wisdom would have said, keep them both. In sowing of the seed, you're only going to get 25%. It's going to grow. The other 75% is going to fall here, there, and I'm not going to go into number 9. Somebody else might have something. Okay. But yeah, why not keep them both? Why not know that, the 99 are just as important as that one?
Anybody else have any thoughts? Because as you say, it was, you could keep them all. But they're sport fishermen. Many of them catch fish and then release them back because they're doing it just for the sport. But there are some fishers, like I think like lobster fishermen. They can only do them if they are a certain age. And the reason they return them back to the water is because they're trying to protect what can come later, the next generation. They don't want to deplete or exhaust the supply, so that they can know that for the next season they'll come and have some mature lobsters and things like that. That could be a part of the thinking as well, or it could also be a part of like the parable of the pearl of great value. When you recognize what's truly important, you let all the other things go in order to secure that pearl of great value, or that thing of great value, that enlightenment, that consciousness, the thing that is more important than all these other things. And Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. He talked about a person buying a plot of land, and there's like this one person has a land, and they don't know that there's a treasure on it. And so they keep just selling it, getting rid of it until somebody buys it, discovers the treasure, and then they're able to make their fortune from it because they recognize what was a great value. Could be the same type of thinking there, of recognizing what's important, and holding on to that. Honestly, now in our modern day, we see that many times. It's almost the reverse in terms of what's important. We have polluted our waters so much that the big fish are full of mercury now. So the old age tunas and the big fish have a lot of mercury in it, and it's really those small fish, like if you can get sardines and all those little smaller fish who haven't had a time to consume as much pollutants, which are better for you nutritionally. So, but it's really, I think, I'm sure they didn't have to deal with those types of problems. We created those problems ourselves, and we continue to create more of them, because all fish now are full of microplastics as well. It's like man has been man's worst enemy in terms of preserving, protecting, and looking out for his interests. It's like in The Matrix, if you're familiar with that movie, where the agent was saying, comparing man to a cancer. Cancers are those cells that grow out of control. And basically, that's what man does on the planet. If you think of the earth as a being, our world as or organism as an entity, it's man and what we do that's rampant and out of control. So we all, in many ways, are like a cancer on the earth. But that's a whole nother thing to get into. Anybody else want to say anything on saying 8? Go ahead, Dale.
Well, there's a story that kind of comes to mind, and I don't remember the name of it, but the concept was there was a man that had land, like you said, but he wanted, I guess, more things, so he left his land. I think he sold his land and started going hither and yon and all around, because he was looking for gold. I think he was looking for gold, and yet and still it was right in his own backyard.
Right.
And so sometimes we will go looking, and I think you said this, go looking to this ministry or that ministry, or I think it's here, I think it's there, when it is all just within us, within our own being, that we have we have everything we need.
Exactly.
We have everything, and so it's just this is thank you for the class. Let me just thank you for the class.
Thank you for being in the class. That goes back to saying 3 from last week, what you said. If you run to the ocean looking for it, the fish will beat you there. If you go to the sky, the birds will beat you there. Because it's already, you can't run, as you say, hither and yon, from, my mom would say, pillar to post, looking for something that you already have within. In the Atlanta Exposition, Booker T. Washington said, cast down your buckets where you are. He was speaking, telling the story of how people were on the Amazon River and they were looking for fresh water. Amazon is a large freshwater river, but they didn't know it. And he was telling them, cast down your buckets where you are. In other words, you don't have to go anywhere. What you got is already, what you're looking for is already here. Just take advantage of it. Open your eyes to it, cast down your buckets, and you got everything you need right there. All right, we're going on to saying 9. Jesus said, "Now the sower went out, took a handful of seeds and scattered them. Some fell on the rock. The birds came and gathered them up. Others fell on the rock, did not take root in the soil, and did not produce ears. And others fell on thorns. They choked the seeds, and worms ate them. And others fell on good soil, and it produced good fruit. It bore 60 per measure and 120 per measure." Again, we don't have to fixate on the numbers themselves. They were just for dramatic emphasis. But we're all familiar with the parable of the sower. That's one of the most famous of all of Jesus's parables. Octavia Butler, one of the few Black female science fiction writers, actually, that's the title of one of her books, The Parable of the Sower. So, any thoughts on this parable, or how it may be the same, or does it differ from what you read previously? Go to saying 10. Jesus said, I have cast fire upon the world, and see, I am guarding it until it blazes. I'd love to hear what people say about that one.
There we go. Let me start this thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, at first I was really, concerned about that because when I read it in the book, my mind went back in the, the 60s when there was a lot of fires.
Burn, happening. Baby, burn.
Yes, and I'm from New York, so of course, when all of Brooklyn, Bronx, and parts of Manhattan was going up in flames, I'm thinking about that, where God said, won't be water but fire next time.
James Baldwin.
So that hit me, and I'm saying, oh my God, so it's supposed to be fire next time. Then I said, wait a minute, no. Here I put down what does fire symbolize, and I have all my little question marks. And to me, it just hit me that fire symbolizes what he is teaching us, what he is saying is so oh God, I'm losing words here. It's so, blazing that he's observing the 12, not only the 12, because it was more than 12, but he's observing everybody, and he's but he's putting this out to the world. The world could be, just Jerusalem or whatever, but he's watching this fire, this word as it spreads. Fire spreads unless you stop it.
Exactly.
And I think that's what he was saying, I am casting out, I'm giving you these words, these meanings, these, what you need, instructions, what you need, and I'm watching to see how it spreads out. And I'm thinking that's, where I got to.
Yep, I like that. Tie you out.
How it spreads out. I think I'm there in terms of how it spreads out, that it's already there, how we say, and so it is, that it's, there's no beginning, there's no end, it's all eternal. So when I think in that concept, it's already taken place. I mean, there's nothing that has to happen, So when you say it until it blazes, that threw me, because it's in the now. It's already present. It's fire. It's already in it. It lives in us. That's who we are.
Yep.
So there's no place to get to, no place to come from. It's just a what's so. So that stumped me.
Dale, you raise your hand.
So I was, I guess, in the dark maybe about the fire, and I was looking for the revealing word, but I couldn't find it. But I went to the metaphysical dictionary, and so let me it's what is. Let me see what it says. Fire is generally used in the Bible as a symbol of destruction or evil and error. It stands for cleansing and purification.
Right.
In its true essence, it is the fire of spirit.
There you go.
That was interesting. And so okay, let me finish. Or the divine energy which never ceases its life-giving, purifying glow. When its cleansing work is completed in man's mind and body, there is no more error to be consumed and it then manifests in purified man as the eternal life. So what that says for me is there's a fire shut up in your bones.
Mm-hmm.
And when that fire comes, you you maybe purifying
mm-hmm.
and cleansing
Mm-hmm.
those negative thoughts and even emotions that you might have
Mm-hmm.
about Trump.
Yep.
But anyway, no. Oh God, that's not funny. I'm sorry. But
actually, it was funny, Dale.
that that flyer, that was for me. That was very interesting. Very interesting.
I think you all were hitting on it, and Dale, especially when you went to the metaphysical Bible dictionary definition of it, because we have to think of fire as both a tool of destruction, but also a tool of purification. In order, we'd also heard about the wheat and the chaff. Let them grow together. Then they go and gather the chaff and throw it into the flame to be burned. We know that gold, when you put it in you put it in the crucible to melt it down and pour it out, it gets rid of the impurities that are in it. And fire, even we've seen all these giant wildfires that happen over in the West. California gets a lot of them. And the reason so many are happening is because fire is a natural cleansing that happens. We got it wrong in terms of we were trying to prevent all these fires for so long. Smokey the Bear, remember, only you can prevent forest fires. And those are the ones that, again, obviously are the ones that man is doing. But nature often set fire, and that was part of the cleansing, that it would clear out all those the underbrush and all that other. So now they've been protected for so long. You have all that fuel that adds to the fire, and that's why they've been so big. And people have begun to learn that maybe we need to take a new attitude about how we deal with fires, and that's why they have controlled burns, that they are setting fires intentionally to burn off some of this underbrush so that you don't get those giant fires. And also the burning of it actually produces ash that nourishes the land. So it's all, nature has all this stuff already figured out. Every time we insert ourselves into it, that's when we start messing things up. But Jesus was coming, as you said, like with the Spirit. Remember when they were in the upper room, and it described how the Holy Spirit came down like tongues of fire that landed on them. So it's something that we're in the month of zeal. Zeal is about passion, but that passion can consume you also. It can burn you up, and it can leave you totally spent. That's when we call them zealots. That zeal, and you go into zealots, fanatics. You shorten it to fan, but it's a fanatic who has no control over their passion or emotion. And that's when that lion devours the man. Same thing, that fire can consume you also. But Jesus was talking with the Spirit, as you say, I want to get it started. You have that fire within you. This little light of mine, this God light of mine, you have that already within you. I want to stay here and guard it until it becomes a blaze. I want to see that lamp turned up to its fullest so that it could illuminate more. You are a city that is set on the hill that can't be hid, but you have to have your fire burning to be that beacon so everybody can see that. Let's go on to 11. And Jesus said, he said before, I came with a sword. I didn't come, you guys think, don't let the smooth taste fool you. I came to, you're going to get upset by a lot of what I'm teaching. So we only think of Jesus in the way of peace and love and everything. But remember, he came in and turned over the tables in the temple when they weren't acting right. Saying 11, Jesus said, this heaven will pass away and the one above it will pass away. The dead are not alive and the living will not die. In the days when you consumed what is dead, you made it what is alive. When you come to dwell in the light, what will you do? On the day when you were one, you became two. And when you become two, what will you do? And I want to say, what will you do when you interpret this? Because there's a lot of stuff going on here. I see we're running out of.
Are we gonna do it in the 3 parts like it is in the book, or you want to do it in the 1 part?
Do it any way you want. What was the song? Do it any way you want to do it. Do it any way you want.
Oh, you keep bringing up songs.
I'm an old school music head. I love R&B. I love hip hop. I love house, dance, all of it. So jazz.
Well, let me just say that I was completely consumed by this, and I didn't know nothing. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do.
So, have you picked up the text, Dale? Unlocking the Secrets.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Yeah, I picked it up. That secret I did not lock.
That secret is still locked.
Oh God. Oh.
Okay, so the as in the book where he separates it for 11a, where it says the heavens will pass, the one above it will pass, the dead are not alive, those alive will not die. I think I shorten it. I have that. Well, there's 2 events. You have the multi heavens and the state of life. Religiously speaking, only those who abide in the one who lives, which is God, will never die. And we say that. We say, the person is not dead. The person is still within our hearts. And because God is within us, we will never die. We will live on. So I'm going to stop there if somebody wants to get that part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't know how many students are. 7 people. I just want some other people to speak too. I don't want to, always have my hand up.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I don't have the book. I don't remember that Unlocking the Secret, but I will get it, before the next class. I did have an answer in terms of what will I do now that we know that we are, with separate but united.
Mm-hmm.
And I just worked on finishing off an article I was writing, and in that article I stressed that once we attune to this oneness, what there is to do is to listen, sense the nudging, the guidance, and have that be what governs us, our actions, our thoughts, that would be a guiding force in life. And that's all I know to do, is to just attune as much as, as closely as I can to that inner guidance, that inner voice, that inner presence, and allow it to operate in and through me.
Mm-hmm.
And I do get a lot of that. I get a lot of synchronicity. I get a lot of nudgings. I get a lot of sensing, and yeah. And so that's what I write about, and my lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
has become my lifestyle.
Okay, we're going to have to share some of your writings with us at some point.
Okay. Love to. Mm-hmm.
I think it's just also saying that our experience here is temporary. This heaven and these things, they're all ephemeral. They're all going to go away. What we know and what we hold true, we're going to go away. We're just like a blink in time. So don't get so consumed and get so locked into the here and now, knowing that change is inevitable. That's part of the circle of life as well. And if you recognize and realize that you are spirit, you know that you're not dying either, that you're recycling and coming back just as so much of nature returns. So that's why the dead are not alive. Literally, those physically dead are not alive, but also those dead in consciousness are not alive. That they consumed what was dead. They had their dead beliefs, their dead thoughts, their dead ideologies, their dead doctrines, and all those types of things. And we need to be more concerned with what brings us life, what allows us to live. Jesus said, "I came that you may have life and have it more abundantly." And so many of us are dead in our attitudes, dead in our thinking, dead in so many ways. We might not be physically dead, but spiritually, we are on our last our last legs. We say we're one foot in the grave and the other on the banana peel. So
Yeah, those old teachings have to die too. Those old ways have to die.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the whole thing for me with 11 is to know yourself. And B, says, when I come into the light, I will eat of the spirit. That's to be spiritually enlightened and to glorify God only.
Mm-hmm.
In C, where I have know thyself, and he says Adam was androgyny,
right,
both male and female.
On the two, and you were one.
If you think of it, Adam was, and male, period, is of the X and the Y gene.
Right.
I really don't understand why a lot of, they're not teaching it right in school, but
we all start out as female, and then right.
And according to the Bible, Eve came from Adam's rib,
right,
which means it was a female rib, So, but where he says, "What now?" is to know yourself,
right,
to become one with God,
right. Because as you said, we were made as one. We were made in union with God. We had that balance of the yin and the yang, the intuitive and the logical, the rational, the so-called masculine and so-called feminine. In the beginning, God created man made him, Adam made him them. Male and female created he them. So you are born with that duality within you. But we get out of kilter, we get out of balance. So we're trying to return to that oneness, just in balance and harmony with ourselves, and then in balance and harmony with God and with nature. So there was a time when we were one. We became two because the allegory of in the garden of the knowledge of good and evil, I call it the concept of good and evil. When we begin to think of having that duality, we became dual ourselves. We had a dual consciousness, and now that we're two, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to try to come back to that at one-ment, to the atonement, to returning to the Garden of Eden.
Union with God.
In union with God, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Number 12. The disciples said to Jesus, "We know that you will depart from us. Who is to be our leader?" Jesus said to them, "Wherever you are to go to James, the righteous, for whose sake heaven and earth came into being." This could be James, the brother of Jesus, but we know James actually did lead the church in Jerusalem. When Jesus departed, James was the one who led the church there in Jerusalem. We know Thomas went on to India. Paul was over in Rome. They all went on their various missions. Mark went down to Ethiopia. So there were different places that they did, but James was the one who was there in Jerusalem. And in fact, before Paul engaged on his first missionary journeys, they had to go back. Him and Barnabas had to go back to Jerusalem to get sanction to go out with the gospel. And James was the one who granted them that authority because Paul wanted to go out to the Gentiles. And there was a big contention there. Was this just for the Jews or was it for the Gentiles also? And I know we're at time now, so we'll speed through some of these. Jesus said to his disciples on 13, compare me to someone and tell me whom I am like. We heard a similar thing in the Gospels when Jesus said, who do men say that I am? Simon Peter said to him, you are like a righteous angel. Matthew said to him, you are like a wise philosopher. Thomas said to him, Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like. Jesus said, I am not your master because you have drunk. You have become intoxicated from the bubbling spring which I have measured out. And he took him and withdrew him and told him three things. When Thomas returned to his companions, they asked him, what did Jesus say to you? You can imagine that. What did he say? He said, Thomas said to them, if I tell you one of the things which you told me, you will pick up stones and throw them at me. A fire will come out of the stones and burn you up. So in other words, he was saying, y'all ain't ready. You ain't ready for what you can't handle the truth right now. So don't blame me. He told me that, because you guys were coming off with this other stuff. I said, I don't know. I can't. But, Jesus was saying, well, you're the closest to understanding what I was saying. That you have become intoxicated from the bubbling spring which I have measured out. Or in other words, you have digested those words that came out of my mouth. You've understood my teaching and it's lit that fire in you. You being consumed by it. Now you're beginning to get that understanding. So now he has secret teaching within the secret teaching. So he said, come on here, let me holler at you for a second. Then he started sharing even some more insight into him. So that's why Thomas was able to write this gospel, because he was one that was privy to what Jesus was saying. 14.
I wanted to tell y'all, well, I'm going to make it a quick story. I used to go to the, Dr. Barber had classes on, if I'm right, it was Monday nights, but I want to say Tuesday nights.
I think it was Tuesday, yeah.
And, yeah. And this one time she said, I have to go away. She had to go to LA. And she said, and I'm going to have Reverend Gertrude, teach the class next week. So everybody came back, and it wasn't Reverend Gertrude, it was Reverend Dolores.
Okay. So
Reverend Dolores went from where she left off in the book. It was the interpretation of the Bible or something like that. And so she asked, she said, well, where did Reverend, when she came back, she said, where did Reverend Gertrude, finish at and, come up, because she brought a whole bag of goodies. And she said, come up and tell me. Everybody, there was a line of people. And they were all saying, well, Reverend Gertrude did that, and Reverend Gertrude. And she would say no, and, dismiss them. And people were saying, what? So I got up there and I said, first of all, it wasn't Reverend Gertrude, it was Reverend Dolores. I said, she started here where you ended, da-da-da. She said this, da-da-da. And she reviewed the homework, and this is what and so Dr. Barber reached back, handed me a gift. And so I'm going back to my seat, and I said, what did you say? What did you say? And I knew Dr. Barber was watching. I knew she was watching. Right. And I said, I'm not ready. I got to sit down. So she is not taking this gift back. But it was funny because
it was the exact same scenario.
Yeah. He came back and they said, well, what did he say? No, y'all not ready for this.
No, my brother, you got to get your own. So let's see, 14. Jesus said to them, if you fast, you will give rise to sin for yourselves. And if you pray, you will be condemned. If you give alms, you will do harm to your spirits. When you go into any land and walk about in the districts, if they receive you, eat what they will set before you and heal the sick among them. For what goes into your mouth will not defile you, but what issues from your mouth, it is that which will defile you. And that's what you were referring to earlier, Gail.
But also, he says, don't make a public display of what
Right.
you're doing.
Exactly. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you give alms, people got to make these videos. Oh, I gave this man a sock,
Mm-hmm.
when he was on the train, he had no shoes. I gave him a shoe.
Right.
Come on. That's no.
Right.
No.
You're doing it for the recognition, so you've gotten your reward, you've gotten your praise.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's saying if you're not doing it with the right mindset in the beginning, to begin with, you're just causing more trouble for yourself. You're fasting, but you're also giving rise to sin because you said, I'm doing without this, but all the while you're really thinking about it, and that's all you really want to begin. So you're creating more trouble. If you pray, you're condemning yourselves because, as you said, are you doing it as a public show or display? Or are you actually doing it because you're not praying to anything outside of yourself? Prayer is really conditioning yourself to accept what's already being offered to you. So that's really an inside job. It's internal. Don't make a big fuss. Many of us, we've done plant-based lifestyles and so forth. You've done this and that. But some of the most arrogant people are vegans who make a big fuss. I'm vegan. I don't eat this. And we make a big fuss about it. I went to a wedding last weekend. Dr. Richardson was there. William Richardson. He's a homeopath. And so he's mostly plant-based, but at some point when they didn't have what he could eat, and it had some fish in it or something, he said, I'm going to eat this. I'm fine, because it's not, you try to do what you want to do most often. You go with best practices if you can, good, better, best. And if what's presented to you, they don't have what you can, then you accept it humbly. And when they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, you're not trying to upset the apple cart and get all the attention. But, oh, no, I can't do it. It's being gracious, being humble, and being willing to go with those. You don't want to go into somebody's home and then all of a sudden tell them everything you can't eat that they have prepared for you out of love. That's going to stir up some resentment and all those types of things. Just be a little bit more gracious. Because, as he said, it's not what goes into the mouth. It's not what you're going to eat that ultimately is going to defile you. It's what's coming out of it. If you're coming out with arrogance and all these types of things, that I'm better than you because I don't do this or don't do that, then you just killed all of it right there. So maybe you didn't eat a little pork that time, or that little bit of pork that one time ain't gonna kill you. So, but you may have killed somebody's spirit by your attitude and how you dealt with them. And what's more important? It wasn't Paul when he said, or Peter when he had the vision up on the roof. It says, "Don't call anything that I've made unclean. Arise, kill, and eat." And that was also Peter's message to go take the gospel out to the Gentiles. Don't call any of the people that I've made unclean. They are just as good as you are. Saying 15, Jesus says, when you see one who was not born of woman, prostrate yourselves on your faces and worship him. That one is your father. All right. I want to hear y'all on that.
Well, when you see God, you know God. God is not born of woman, God or man. Mm-hmm. God is spirit. Mm-hmm. So when you see the spirit, which is everywhere equally present, then that's when you worship.
Right.
You're supposed to worship you're not supposed to worship anyone. Mm-hmm.
Any other comments or thoughts on this one? Because we know the whole virgin birth narrative of Jesus and everything. But he wasn't the only virgin birth narrative that was given. There was Horus, and there was many others. You go to different cultures that also have similar stories about virgin births and so forth. But we as black folks, and you as black women in particular, the trouble that can come with childbirth and the frailty, because black women often have more trouble with it because they're not willing to believe all the things that black women go through and the pain that they experience and anything, access to care, early prenatal care and any of those things, that human condition that you come through when you're born of a person, of a woman, is actually a pretty frail condition. And that's what so many people are getting up in arms about, in terms of a woman having agency over her own body and dealing with these decisions and dealing with it, because it is not a simple process. Many things can happen, and having a male who won't go through that process determine what you should and should not do is one of the heights of hypocrisy. But also, speaking of it from it being born as a human, if that's all that you think of yourself as, I'm only human, born to make mistakes. If that's all you think of yourself as, you haven't recognized the divinity of yourself as well. So if you only think of yourself as that person being born of a woman as a human, then you miss the divine portion of yourself. And that's what we need to connect with, the Mother, Father, God, the totality of it. Let's get to 16 and then we can get to 17. We'll get out of here because I know I'm holding you guys late. Jesus said, men think perhaps that it is peace which I have come to cast upon the world. They do not know that it is dissension which I have come to cast upon the earth. Fire, sword, and war. For there will be 5 in the house, 3 will be against 2, and 2 against 3. The father against the son, and the son against the father, and they will stand solitary. This sounds almost like our political climate right now.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like Willie Lynch.
Willie Lynch, right? Said that the crabs in the barrel to get them to attack themselves. But he's saying that a lot of times we think of Jesus as the Prince of Peace. But what did we read earlier before? He said he's come with fire. And he mentions that fire and the sword. And he also said that I came with a sword to divide the word of truth, to rightly divide the word of truth. There'll be 5 in the house. There are 3 that are going to get it, 3 that won't. He talked about that before. But that's how it is with anything. Not everybody is going to get everything. And we can't be concerned about that. But, as I said, it's like the politics of now. There are people in households, some are for Trump, some are for, Kamala, and that causes quite a bit of dissension. Out of e pluribus unum, out of many one. Level playing field and judge rightly. Then don't get caught up in those folks who are telling you that it's more manly to do this or more manly to do that. And then you get caught up in misogyny and miss the whole thing. So it's not about the gender or any of those things. It's about who's standing on truth, standing on rightness, justice, peace, all those things, equality for all, come to set at liberty the captives. That's what Jesus said he cared about. It wasn't just a ministry of love, it was a ministry of justice. And our final 17th saying, Jesus said, I shall give you what no eye has seen and what no ear has heard and what no hand has touched and what has never occurred to the human mind. And Gail had touched on that even earlier. That when your consciousness expands, it's going to expand in a way that you're going to be surprised, because it's going to elevate your thinking and your consciousness to a way it's almost like an explosion. That your head is going to explode with all the possibility and what you don't know that you don't know. We have that circle of what we know we know. We're good at it. We know it. We're experienced. There are some things we know we don't know. Say we know we don't know how to do brain surgery. We know we don't have to know how to build a car from scratch. There are things we know we don't know. But the vast majority of things in this universe are things that we don't even know we don't know, because we have no concept or exposure to it, no familiarity. That's the vast majority of the stuff in this universe. If you think of the vastness, the scale of it, how you can go a light year. And you know what a light year is? That's traveling at the speed of light for 1 year. and the speed of light, you talk about thousands of miles. So imagine hundreds of thousands of light years away, some of these things that they're sending us back. Our minds can't even fathom that, can't even conceive of the vastness of the universe. So we can't even conceive of the glory of God. And so that in itself should be a humbling experience for us as we seek to know and learn more, knowing that we're never going to learn it all because there's just so much, but we're excited about the prospect of unfolding even more about ourselves.